The sound of splintering wood and roaring engines echoed through the valley like thunder on a quiet morning. When I arrived, the air smelled of dust and diesel. What was once my grandfather's cabin lay in ruins. The home that had stood for over 70 years, the place where I learned to fish, chop wood, and read under the flickering oil lamp, had been reduced to rubble. I stood frozen, heart pounding, staring at the mess before me. A yellow bulldozer still idled nearby, its operator casually sipping coffee as if he hadn't just erased generations of memory. A group of smug faces from the HOA, Homeowners Association, watched from across the dirt path, whispering and smiling like they'd done something noble. "Excuse me," I said, my voice low but steady. "Who authorized this?" A tall man in a neatly pressed polo shirt turned toward me, arms crossed. His name tag read Ronald Pierce, HOA president. He smirked. "You must be the grandson. We've been trying to contact your family for months. This structure was non-compliant with community regulations. Unsafe, unsightly, and unapproved." I could hardly process the words. Non-compliant? This cabin had been built long before their neatly manicured suburb even existed. "You destroyed my grandfather's home," I said, disbelief cracking through my voice. "Without a court order." "Without even notifying me," Ronald shrugged. "We followed procedure. It's private property within HOA jurisdiction now. You can take it up with the board if you like, but we're within our rights." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my rage. They didn't know who I was, not yet. To them, I was just another non-compliant property owner, another nuisance standing in the way of their precious uniform lawns and white fences. But I wasn't just anyone. I was Justice Alexander Carter, a sitting Supreme Court Justice of the United States. 3 weeks earlier, I had received a letter in my grandfather's name from the local HOA. It was addressed to the owner of Lot 43, claiming unpaid dues and code violations. I had written back, explaining that my grandfather's cabin was on private, deeded land predating the HOA's establishment. It was not, nor had it ever been, subject to their authority. Apparently, that didn't matter to them. The cabin sat at the edge of what used to be our family's property line before developers bought surrounding land and turned it into a luxury community called Willow Estates. My grandfather, who had passed away 2 years earlier, had refused to sell his portion, and I'd kept it preserved as a memorial, a reminder of where we came from. Now it was gone. The HOA didn't know they'd crossed more than just a property line. They'd crossed a constitutional one. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply took out my phone, photographed the wreckage, and turned to leave. Ronald called after me. "You can file a complaint if you want, but it won't change anything." The cabin's history now, he had no idea how right he was. 2 months later, in a quiet courtroom several states away, Willow Estates Homeowners Association versus Carter was brought before the state's highest court. The HOA's lawyers strutted in, confident, armed with binders of community codes and jurisdiction maps. They didn't notice me until the bailiff called the session to order. "All rise for the Honorable Justice Alexander Carter presiding." Their faces drained of color as I entered from chambers. Ronald Pierce's jaw fell open, his attorney whispering something frantic into his ear. I met his gaze only once before sitting behind the bench, expression neutral but eyes cold. "Let's proceed," I said calmly. Over the following hours, evidence was presented. My grandfather's deed, dated 1946, showing clear ownership of the property outside the HOA's jurisdiction, photographs of the cabin, and most damningly, a recorded voicemail from the HOA's own vice president bragging about how they'd finally gotten rid of that old shack eyesore. By the time the arguments concluded, even the defense attorney looked defeated. I handed the written verdict to the clerk. My signature carried the weight of justice, but my heart carried the ache of loss. The court finds the Willow Estates Homeowners Association guilty of unlawful destruction of private property, trespass, and malicious intent. I read aloud. The HOA is ordered to pay full restitution for damages, legal costs, and punitive fines totaling $3.2 million. Additionally, the officers responsible are barred from serving on any homeowners association board for a period of 10 years. The courtroom was silent. Ronald looked like a man watching his own empire crumble. But justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about truth. Months later, I stood again at the site of my grandfather's land. Construction crews were rebuilding, not for another house, but a preservation lodge, exactly as the cabin once was. The same pine beams, the same stone chimney. Inside, I placed a small brass plaque by the front door. It read, "This cabin stood for generations as a symbol of family, freedom, and the right to one's own land. Destroyed by arrogance, rebuilt by justice." I stood there for a long while, listening to the wind through the trees, the sound of peace returning to the valley. As I drove away, I thought about how easy it is for power to be misused by HOA boards, by corporations, by people who think authority gives them the right to control others. My grandfather had once told me, "Son, justice isn't about who has the loudest voice. It's about who stands firm when they're standing alone." He was right. The HOA had bulldozed a cabin, but what they really demolished was their own sense of impunity. And in doing so, they reminded everyone watching, both in that courtroom and beyond, that no one is above the law, not even those who think they own the neighborhood. Would you like me to write 4 AI image prompts for this story to use as thumbnails or YouTube visuals?